Many of the current ways in which AI is being used in schools, whether the teachers know it or not, is proving to be disastrous on the educational outcomes of the students. Increase in screen time and increase in use of gadgets in schools has not improved but made educational outcomes worse for the students over time. For the first time in the global history, we see students' academic outcomes decreasing.
You also won this $1 million prize. What was it like winning it?
Our mindset going into the competition was essentially set on taking away and learning as much as possible, knowing that we're not going to win. We have nothing to lose. If I can build their prototypes, maybe I can start my own company too. How do we strategize ourselves to scale into different countries and rapidly expand into many different schools within a country?
Welcome to Brave. Learn from Southeast Asia's best tech leaders. Build the future, learn from our past, and stay human in between. No BS on success. I'm Jeremy Au, venture capitalist, serial founder, Harvard MBA, science fiction nerd, and dad of 2 daughters. Every week, we debate startup news, interview changemakers, answer listener questions, and share personal insights. Join our movement of over 40,000 members and get transcripts, resources, and community at www.bravesea.com. Stay well and stay brave.
Hey Adam, I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Yeah, so you're the co-founder of this education tech company, Stickum, and really got a chance to interview your co-founder about winning $1 million prize. Congratulations on that and winning that with him. And I thought this was a great opportunity to hear your angle on it, but also because you have a different journey as well. Could you introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, I'm Adam, co-founder of Stickum. So at Stickum, we are bringing quality STEAM education to every child because right now there are nearly 1 billion children who are growing up without access to STEAM education. And the things that you learn through STEAM education, maybe a decade ago, would have been a luxury for students to have. But now, in this day and age, is becoming an absolute necessity. So you see a lot of public governments implementing and trying to implement STEAM education across all their public schools, but they are facing major hurdles trying to do it. So we're trying to bridge that gap.
What got you started in robotics and education tech? What's your story?
So I built my first Mars rover. It's like a robotics kit. I can send you some pictures afterwards.
Yeah,
When I was 6 years old back in Korea.
yeah.
And that's what really got me into tinkering and building because I was trying to fiddle with all the red, black, and the yellow wires, trying to understand what these are supposed to do, trying to understand how a solar panel works,
Yeah.
and plugging into like LEDs and all that stuff. And when I migrated over to Singapore when I was 7, I tried to join the robotics club in my primary school.
Yeah.
And they had a selection test to join the robotics club.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So back then I was in like chess club, I was in badminton, and there was no selection test. So I thought, why is there a selection test? And only many years down the line, I understood why. And that was because robotics kits were firstly very expensive. Each of those kits costing about $600-700 back then.
Yeah.
And there were not enough teachers who can just teach coding and robotics in schools. They had to hire like external trainers to come down to teach. So they had limited seats. For my batch, about 100 students signed up for the test, and they only had seats for about 5 to 10 students. And I went for the test and I didn't make it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was pretty unfortunate. It hit me pretty hard as a 7-year-old kid. And when I went back home, I told my mom about it. And my mom, being the loving mom that she is, she walked with me to the school the very next day, walked with me to the principal's room, and she talked to the principal for 1.5 hours and somehow convinced her to let me into the robotics club. So that changed my life because after that, I went to school for robotics. I didn't go to school for academics, maybe sometimes for friends, but in primary school, secondary school, all the way till JC, even though my JC didn't have a robotics club, I created a robotics club so that I can do robotics all the way.
Yeah. And obviously, your mom loved you doing robotics. Do you feel like they encouraged you to do more robotics or academics or sports? How did you think about it?
From what my parents were trying to make me do.
Yeah, exactly. Did you feel like they were like, oh, this person's too much of a nerd or something? Needs to get more sunlight and touch some grass.
I mean, for the robotics side, after she did that, I essentially just flew on my own.
Yeah.
But she did place a lot of pressure on me to do well in academics, of course, and trying to get into like win awards and sports and stuff like that. But I was quite a rebel from early on. Clearly remember, Sec 2 was a defining year for me. So after Sec 2, I started going through a lot of puberty and rebelling against my parents and started to carve my own path in like just doing things what I wanted to do, figuring out what I love doing and what I really didn't like doing. And they're good and bad, but I think that really helped me find my character.
Yeah, fantastic. And you went to, there's a difference between primary school and secondary school robotics. I think you went to my alma mater as well, Anglo-Chinese School Independent.
Yeah, yeah.
The best is yet to be. That's our school motto.
Gold.
Blue and gold and red. So there you are in the school. What's the difference? Because obviously, I think at that time, when I started out, I was also in the robotics club back then. Many years your senior. And it was also very nerdish. I think we're definitely the uncool kids working on Lego Mindstorm and Micro Mouse. And I just want to let people know that I did win some competitions at the inter-school level, both on robotics and computer side. But of course, you were many years later after me as well. I'm sure that there was also, I think, a higher level of support on robotics. So how did that lead you to flourish or change your approach to robotics?
I wonder if there was an influence from your batch, but the approach that ACSI Robotics team had compared to many of the other schools was that it's purely a student-run CCA, which means that we are reliant on our seniors teaching the juniors to be able to bring the club to a different level every single year. Unlike other schools where they would employ external trainers to come down to the school, or the teachers would be the one trying to teach the students how to build better robots and all that. There was a very distinctive difference in the way the students learned, I think, because of this approach. There were schools like Hwa Chong Secondary were world champions multiple times, and the teacher was the driving force. But for us, it was all taught by our seniors, teaching the juniors, bringing us up to speed in the hopes that we'll go beyond what they were capable of doing by the time we graduate and teach that to our juniors. So that approach really allowed us a lot of freedom for us to explore. I still remember in my first day cutting the aluminum piece the wrong way, and I'm like, oh, God damn it, I've wasted an aluminum piece. And then the senior's like, oh no, just get a new piece. Like, doesn't matter. Because it's a very rare feeling, especially in that day and age, for people to encourage you to fail, to make mistakes. During exams, during the general academic experience, it's just like, you cannot make mistakes. You need to get 100 out of 100 or like A star and all that stuff. So there's so much pressure to not make mistakes, but that CCA really just allowed me to understand why making mistakes actually can be so valuable.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that you went on to do robotics and focus on robotics. What were these competitions like?
So in secondary school, we were using the VEX robotics system. It's all these big aluminum pieces. Quite often, we had to build robots that were taller than ourselves. They would start very small. They would start like this big. And then by the time they expanded all the way, they were like taller than ourselves. And very competitive. So most of my experience in robotics in my secondary school and JC was around VEX, and there were like national level competitions, regional APEC regional competitions, and then if we did well there, then we earned the spot to go to the global robotics championships, usually in US. And I think going to the world championships when I was year one was a very defining moment, because that was the first time I actually got to meet such a international pool of people around me. Like, there were teams from every single corner of the world. Where else in the world would I be able to get such an experience? And the way the game was designed is that you are never working alone. Every single match you're playing, you have to play with another team from another country that's randomly allocated to you. So you have to strategize, you have to go through the language barriers, try to understand, okay, what am I going to do and what are you going to do at what point in time so that we can best win this match. So that opened up a whole new perspective for me, like just expanding my worldview.
And so what's interesting is obviously we're talking about two different themes, right? One is obviously the robotics or the technical education that you had. Another part is you as a student learning this experience. And the reason why we're talking about this is because you eventually met Kai, your co-founder, which does both of these things. It does both robotics and technology, but more importantly, from a modality perspective, it's more about teaching and education tech. So how did you meet your co-founder?
So I was in Anglo-Chinese School Independent. My co-founder, Kai, was in Singapore School of Science and Technology. And we have a very close relationship in the robotics club. So both of us were in our respective robotics clubs. He was 4 to 5 years my junior. And we'll meet each other from time to time in like friendly matches or scrimmages or brainstorming sessions where the two schools will come together to try to develop better technologies or methods or strategies to win that year's competition. And my memory of Kai is that he was this goofy little kid at the corner of the classroom or in the games, and always playing and goofing around, not really taking this competition seriously. But that's just his character. It's, I think, where his creativity comes from. And for me, I was taking every single session that we had very seriously, trying to lead the conversation, trying to win as much as we can. So it was a very different dynamic. But I remember him just standing out as someone that is interesting, but I didn't really pay him a lot of attention back then. Only many years later, when I started to see what he was doing on Instagram, and that I started to ask him, okay, what is this? This seems interesting. And how can I potentially help? And eventually, I asked him whether I could be his co-founder and join the company.
Fantastic. And what's interesting is that you chose to build this education tech times robotics. Like, why did you want to build this company in the first place? I mean, you could have done so many different things, right? You could have joined a robotics company in the US. You could have worked in manufacturing and engineering. Yes, the world's your oyster, right? A little bit, right? So what's going on there? Yeah.
So for me, my perspective on my career life was that back in JC and going into the army was, okay, I want to join the best robotics firm in the world, back then being Boston Dynamics, and become a really good robotics engineer. But my perspective on this changed when right after I ORD'd from my national service, I had the opportunity to intern at a venture capital firm, not on the finance side or the analyst side, but on the innovation side. So working directly with the founders, building the robotic prototypes for them, and really immersing myself in the startup ecosystem. And when I was looking at all these founders, one of them was trying to change the genes of rice so they can grow in saline waters and eventually the sea. Another guy was trying to make non-invasive helmets so that we can interpret human emotions and control gadgets without any invasive devices. So many of these founders really inspired me to think, what if I can build their prototypes? Maybe I can start my own company too. Then a few months during the internship, as my idea of what I want to potentially start was forming, I started to see Kai's stories on this project that he was working on. He was a year one in SP at Singapore Poly, and he was working on this project using sticks and connectors to build different kinds of shapes and mechanisms and hopefully robots. And a lot of things aligned. So when I asked him whether he wanted to take this into a company, he said yes. And that was when it really clicked, because my domain expertise in robotics was something that he could very well use. My still very rudimentary knowledge, but still a decent amount of knowledge in businesses, working with founders, startups, fundraising and all that. I felt like I had enough. Of course I didn't, but I felt I had enough to try to help him at least get started, and my personal conviction to try to start my own company. So when these three things aligned, and I asked him, hey, can I join your company? And luckily he said yes.
Oh, fantastic. And there you are wanting to do it, but wanting to do something is different from staying to do it, right? Because this is not an easy field to build. It's not easy to understand in my head. You call it STEAM education. Still, you got to sell to schools, sell to teachers, sell to parents. Yeah. It's not an easy job or even a company to build. Yeah. So tell me about that. Yeah.
So I think what keeps me going is that since the very beginning, my exposure to entrepreneurship was always tied to social impact. So a lot of the startups in Audacity were focused a lot on creating some kind of social impact. And when I started to build Stickum, the first competition that we went for, the Youth Action Challenge, we went through the social enterprise track, and that's when I really formalized my learning of what social entrepreneurship could be. And looking back, one of the reasons why Stickum resonated so much with me was that, as I mentioned in primary school, the selection test that I had, it was quite traumatic in terms of my experience as a kid. And now that I'm building this, I understand that by continuing to scale this to as many schools as I possibly can, it reduces the number of kids having to go through what I went through and allowing them to just express themselves, their interests, without being held back by limitations of resources or limitations of teachers' expertise. So that's what really keeps me going. And of course, just the fun of building. In my university, we have to do mandatory internships. And I was interning at a firm as, I guess, an SME. They're still considered a startup called Rapsodo. They're quite similar to Stickum in a sense that they have a hardware component and a software component, and they sell both to the consumers and corporates. And within 2 weeks, so the first week I spent most of my time asking the different managers, the principal engineers, the business managers, the marketing guys, hey, how do you do your stuff? Why do you do this? What kind of systems do you use? What kind of strategies do you use and why? And after that, after I felt like I have acquired all the information I could possibly get out of this experience, I would finish the work that they allocated to me from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. until I clock out, I would be right in front of their faces doing Stickum work. I was just so bored and there was nothing much to do. And if that is what corporate life is, I'm pretty damn sure that's not something I'll survive in.
What does a day in the life look like in this? Is it like prototyping new kits? Is it brainstorming? Is it talking and selling to teachers? What does it look like, a day in the life look like?
It has evolved tremendously since the very beginning. In the very beginning, it was always about printing new designs, testing them out myself, and then conducting workshops with underprivileged children for free so that I can test out the products some more and get their feedback visually. And that essentially transformed into, okay, how can we start positioning this for schools? When we started to get traction from school teachers asking us, hey, what is this about? Can we use it in our school? Can I buy it? My focus shifted to, okay, how can we package this? What kind of additional services or platforms can we build so that it serves the schools and actually meets their needs? Then now it's more about, okay, bigger picture things like, how do we strategize ourselves to scale into different countries and rapidly expand into many different schools within a country. Like, for example, this year, my main two goals for Stickum is to first figure out what are the characteristics of countries that will allow for a product like Stickum to expand, to have a pretty easy market entry to the country. So things like, okay, is there government policies that are supporting STEAM education practices or investment in Stickum or investment in STEAM education products? Or what is the bureaucratic process like to get government approval to use this in public schools? The second goal is finding out replicable strategies to expand within a country. So once we have identified the countries that we want to go into, we then need to focus on, okay, how do we expand quickly within a specific country? So these are the two things that we're trying to figure out this year. Very big picture stuff.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that you also won this $1 million prize. What was it like winning it?
I very distinctively remember me and Kai talking about this. We were deciding whether we should go because the flights there were not sponsored and it was about 1,500 US per person. And for us back then, it was a pretty decent amount of money. And also, it will take up one whole month of both of our times. So we were deciding, should we go? First and foremost, of course, we started evaluating what are our chances of actually winning this thing, right? And we were looking at the past winners. We were trying to understand what kind of winners the judges might be looking for or the hot press might be looking for. And we felt that they were very skewed towards critical social impact. So things like water sanitation so that people don't die of waterborne diseases, or sanitary pads for women so that they don't suffer illnesses or have many health complications due to unsanitary habits. And I felt that, okay, this is not really where Stickum fits into. And therefore, me and Kai were pretty convinced that we were not going to win this, even if we went. So with that mindset, we started thinking, okay, should we still go? We know that we're not going to win. Should we still go? And I guess the defining moment was, firstly, when else in the world would you be able to live in a castle in the suburban area of London for free, right? And wow, it was so beautiful. But of course, the more important reasons were, in what other scenario would you be able to meet some of the world's best founders, student founders from all over the world and talk to them, brainstorm with them? And thirdly, for the mentors, where else would you be able to get such a high-class group of mentors in a single location that you get to talk to, get advice for free for a whole month? So we felt that if we were to leverage these two things as much as we can, it would make the trip worth it. So our mindset going into the competition was essentially set on taking away and learning as much as possible, knowing that we're not going to win. We had nothing to lose. So every single day during the competition, we were like pestering the mentors, pitching to them again and again and again, to a point where one of the mentors said, haven't you guys pitched enough to us already? And we were like, we'll be scheduling them for multiple meetings in a single day. And they were pretty done with us, but I think they appreciated our authenticity behind why we were approaching them. We were not trying to impress them. We told them every single problem that we had in our company straight out and trying to seek their advice on how we can solve this problem. And for some reason, from the 24 teams that went to London, we were shortlisted as the top 8 teams to present in the global finals. And when I saw the first team pitch, we were like, okay, it's okay. We gave it our best shot. That team will most likely win. Their pitch was essentially perfect. They have really good traction. They have everything lined up, and the judges seemed to like them. And we were the last team to pitch. It was nerve-wracking still, trying to pitch very well in front of an audience of 500 different people from all over the world and a very established, distinguished judges with the panel. But me and Kai went in thinking, okay, we'll give it our best shot, whatever happens, but we just remembered that we took away as much as we possibly can out of it. Yeah. So when we won, it was a very unexpected moment. I think there were a lot of videos circulating about how we reacted. It was a little bit stupid, but it shows that we really didn't expect it.
Yeah, fantastic. That's amazing that you won this. Why do you think you won? Why do you think your team won?
Yeah, so we were quite surprised. So we talked to a few of the mentors and talked to a few of the judges. And the general feedback for the mentors that got to interact with us for the period of the month, they told us that it was really our authenticity and our drive to improve the company that felt like a slightly of a differentiating factor, where we really had nothing to hide. Our mindset there was really just trying to take away as much as possible. And I think the way we approach the competition with that mindset is a little bit different from someone who is approaching the competition with the absolute drive to win. Yeah. The perspective in which we are approaching the mentors is a bit different. Yeah. That's the first one. The second note that we got from the panel of judges was that we seemed a bit more established than most of the other startups. We had a lot more traction in terms of numbers of users, not necessarily the amount of revenue that we have generated. And I think that gave them a bit more of a confidence that, okay, this is proven, this is reliable, and this is going to work.
Yeah, fantastic. And what's interesting is that now looking forward, obviously, you're starting to expand in new countries, to think about how to use those proceeds to grow the company, etc. What do you think the future of education is for kids? And I say this because I think between the time you won the prize and even today, I think AI, for example, the concept of, I think I would say chatbots is one side, but children using them, Australia recently banned kids from using social media below 16 years old. But also I think seeing like autonomous agents like CloudBot and like things that are learning by themselves.
Yes.
And the models are continue getting better. So I'm just curious how you see that world changing for education from your perspective.
Many of the current ways in which AI is being used in schools, whether the teachers know it or not, is proving to be disastrous on the educational outcomes of the students, especially the low-hanging fruits. Like a few months ago, you would have seen, especially during the exam periods, tons of ads on Instagram Reels and stories about, oh, you can use this AI to take a picture of your questions or generate the answer and explain the answer to you. Or you have this highlighter pen with a micro camera inserted inside of it, and you just go through your questions or your essays and it'll tell you the answers. Those don't help with education, and the students know it, but the teachers don't know that many of the students are using it anyway. But these are the low-hanging fruits, the low-hanging applications of what AI can do. And I don't know if you have read the recent article by The Economist that mentioned about how EdTech is profitable, but is essentially useless. I think it's a very sweeping statement.
Yeah.
And of course, they went into detail, but one of the consistent trends is that increase in screen time and increase in use of gadgets in schools has not improved, but made educational outcomes worse for the students over time. For the first time in the global history, we see students' academic outcomes decreasing, not increasing. For the longest time, it's been increasing all the way till schools started to implement and introduce en masse all these screen devices like Chromebooks or tablets. So AI, I think, has a bit of a ways to go in terms of the way it can be implemented in education that will actually help students get better outcomes. One of the ways is using AI to actually understand the understanding that the students have. For example, if you give them a question, they answered the question wrongly, and based on how they answered the question wrongly, you're able to understand what knowledge are they lacking, what foundational knowledge are they lacking. This is very hard to do by a teacher because they don't have enough time to analyze every single question one by one for a specific student. But an AI can do that almost instantaneously and understand, okay, this student is lacking this aspect, this foundational knowledge, this prerequisite, and then they're able to formulate a question based on these two things. So extreme customization towards students is one of the directions in which I think AI could be very useful for students.
So I think there's almost two different conversations that are happening, right? One is, what is the correct endpoint for education in terms of the job or whether there'll be doctors anymore or lawyers anymore? And then the second one is, how do you accelerate that learning, right? So I don't think there's which is almost pedagogical, I would say. So maybe we'll put those two aside, but let's focus on the pedagogy side, which is saying that students are skipping their homework.
Essentially.
And full disclosure, I definitely copied a lot of homework in secondary school.
Yeah. Me too.
So what's so bad about using AI to copy homework? No, I'm just saying, what's the difference between, I say, copying my friend who was the math genius for Daniel, if you're out there, thank you for your math homework. It was fantastic. And then I can't remember who was doing it for Chinese, but students have always kind of like cheated on homework. What's wrong with AI or approach or whatever it is you think? Yeah.
To me, it's the barrier of entry. How easily can you get answers that you haven't done the mental work to get?
Yeah.
So if you were to copy answers, you have to sell that social capital, like, hey, can I borrow your homework? I need to copy it. And there's a bit more resistance to that than to just go onto an anonymous platform or ChatGPT or Claude and just send in the question and say, just generate the answer for me. I'm just going to copy it brain dead. At least if you are copying with your friends, maybe there's a chance for you to try to at least understand what you're copying by asking the person. Because human-human interaction is a lot more easier to, I think, invoke those kind of need to actually understand what you're trying to do. But with AI, it just fulfills a very plain purpose. That is that I'm going to give you this question and all I need from you is an answer so that I can just get this done and over with and submit it to the teacher because it's due tomorrow morning. Yes, well, back then I also copied a lot of homework, but most of it was because I was late and it was due the very next day. If I had the chance to actually try to at least understand a certain component of it or try to understand, even if I'm copying, I'll try to understand why is it solved this way. And sometimes I'll question my friend's answers. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. This looks very wrong. And I try to solve it myself. So I think it comes down to the resistance.
Okay, so That's interesting, right? Because some say potato, some say potato, right? But if I take a step back, let's look at this, which is, okay, we're saying that education at some level is imitation, right? Or we are trying to follow what teachers emulate as role models. The teachers show us certain ways of solving a problem, and then we copy the teacher's approach and I try to apply the different exercises. Okay. And then when we get our friends' homework and we copy them, then we're still at least doing the steps in between, and it forces us to copy / imitate them, and hopefully some of that absorbs through osmosis. And what we're saying is robots make it too simple because it just gives you the answer straight away. But I'm just talking out loud. Like, it's a computer screen, it still says 2 + 2 + 3 = 7.
It shows the steps.
And it shows the steps. Then I can just ask AI and say, explain it to me differently, explain it to me as a song. Or like, what makes this more wrong?
I guess it comes down to the mindset the students really have. And using AI for solving homework problems would be a very good tool if they have the critical ability to understand that I need to understand how this AI has solved this problem so that I can replicate that knowledge for myself. And if the student has that motivation and uses AI for that, then I would more than encourage them to do it. But unfortunately, when we copy our friends' answers and when we're trying to finish our homework, our primary objective is to just get the goddamn thing done and over with.
Right.
And I'm a culprit of this as well. During my university, when I was studying one day before every single exam and submitting homework that I don't really understand, 90% of the time I'm just trying to get the answers. I'm not really interested in learning about how they got the answers unless I'm starting to question the AI platforms for the answers. I'm just copying it straight away. And I'm pretty sure there will be a similar mindset for many other students in secondary schools and GCs as well. And the reason why I was able to do that so extensively is just because of how accessible it was.
Right.
Like a good friend, if you have good friends, then they would like, hey, at least you should try to at least understand instead of just plainly copying my answers maybe. Yeah, the accessibility of cheating, I guess in this case, is the issue.
Okay. We do know that some students who are using cheating without understanding. And of course, there are obviously students who are using it for learning. So for me, I've learned a lot about biology in my work. And I think AI is fantastic at explaining it from grade 1
Yes.
to simplifying it to secondary school to, as in, I think they're good at explaining it step by step and infinitely patient. And I think one of the benefits of AI is that I get to learn at 10 p.m. at midnight in bed, just on my phone, and I'm just asking lots of questions versus historically I would have had to sit down and study from a book. But let's talk about the other end, the end point, which is like, is it even worth studying anymore? If the world is full of like super smart robots that outthink us, outcompete and do everything, should we all become plumbers and electricians and massage technician? Yeah.
Like more human-oriented jobs, right?
Yeah.
I think my perspective on this is quite clear. Especially for primary schools and secondary schools, the objective of the education system is not to prepare you for a specific job, but to help you learn how to think and how to learn. That is, if anything, I think that is the most important part about our education system, learning how to think and learning how to learn. When it comes to vocational institutions or universities where you're starting to specialize into a specific role, the question of whether AI will be replacing that role is a very big question for everyone nowadays, and it's still an evolving process. I think one of the most hit industries would be lawyers. Like with the recent budget announcement by our PM Lawrence Wong, he mentioned, okay, AI for lawyers would be something that we would like to encourage using. Accountancy is also another very big area that they're trying to encourage AI use because it is just that applicable. So people who are in accounting fields will probably need to rethink about how they're supposed to position themselves in this industry and how AI can either help them instead of replacing them. So in universities, I think I don't have an answer for this, but my approach would be that, for example, I think another very impacted area will be coding. Like the past decade, there were so many students that were just focusing on, okay, I need to become a coder. But now even in giant companies like Spotify, 90% of all the coding is done by AI bots, and the software engineers, they are just reviewing it, right? So it's still a question that I think we as an entire education system need to figure out. But I think the initial philosophy of how primary school and secondary school education is to help us learn how to think and learn can actually be extended all the way to universities as well. Maybe specific towards certain industries like engineering or business or marketing. But also, now that I think about it, of course, the STEM skills, your communication skills, your creativity, your ability to think independent thoughts, being able to empathize with people on a deeper level, those are skills that I think universities could definitely focus a lot more on, because those are the skills that gives humans our ability to be creative and original compared to AI, which is essentially just regurgitating and repackaging different information that it already has.
Yeah. And lastly, could you share a personal story about a time that you've been brave?
So the one thing that comes to mind, this isn't necessarily about being brave, but being open to opportunities that you might not necessarily be comfortable with. So my trajectory into entrepreneurship started when I started interning at a venture capital firm, right? And the chances of that happening was actually tremendously low, because throughout my years in JC, I was a deep-setted introvert. I was not talking to people at all. I'll be in the canteen eating alone on my own, or sitting with my water polo team if they were there. And when my primary school friend that I haven't talked to for many, many years randomly called me up and said, hey, there's this lunch that I'm having with a bunch of really cool people this Saturday, and would you like to join? And normally I would have said no.
Yeah.
Like, why would I go for a meeting for a lunch with a bunch of people that I don't know,
Right.
with a person that I haven't really talked to for so many years? But there was a small part of me that was just curious that said, hey, why not just go? What's there to lose? And it was through that lunch that I got to meet the different kinds of founders and really understand what this community was all about. And that was what made me think, okay, I want to intern in this venture capital firm. Yeah. I realized that looking back, this very unlikely opportunities happened multiple times that were monumental in my life direction. In primary school, the robotics lab, the principal could have very well said no, but my mom made it happen. Or at the end of primary school, when I was asking my form teacher, how well do you think I'll do for my PSLE exams, so that I can decide on what kind of schools I should put up for in my ranking list. And I really wanted to get into like RI, ACSI, Hwa Chong, and I put all those three, even though my teacher said, there's no way you're going to get that score, be realistic. And lo and behold, my PSLE score was good enough to get into ACSI. Really just putting myself out there when I know I normally wouldn't, I think has proved very helpful for me.
On that note, I'd love to summarize the 3 big takeaways. First, thanks so much for sharing about how you discovered your joy for robotics. I thought it was, really inspiring to hear about you and actually your mom, helping you out in terms of looking at robotics, having to face being disqualified from being able to enter robotics, but managed to get in, and discovering a love for computers and robots, and also education and teaching as well. So I thought it was just a nice story for everybody who's like still discovering their own passion. Secondly, thanks so much for sharing about actually the other side, which is from the educator and education perspective. I really appreciate you sharing about it, which is that now that we're older, we understand that there's a shortage of robotic kits and robotics teachers who are available, which caused a small number of openings at Robotics Club, which caused you to be disqualified. But I think it shows a lot of empathy, I think, for schools which are struggling with the right resources to teach the skills that people feel are important for the future as well. And so I thought it was just fascinating to hear about how that being a trigger and inspiration and catalyst for building your current company that's helping make robotics and other education more accessible for students and teachers and schools. Lastly, thanks for sharing about what's it like to think about the future of education. I think that a lot of parents and educators are still out there thinking about what the right approach is. And I think obviously in the short term, everybody's sending the kids to robotics class. My daughter actually, both of them go to robotics class today at the ages of 4 and 6, which is very early. I think shockingly early. My wife chose, not me, frankly. I was like, I feel as somebody who's a very good robotics guy called myself Jeremy, I thought that my wife made a decision that she wanted them to start early. But I thought it was just fascinating to hear that beyond obviously giving kids more exposure to robots, maybe there's something to be had about what is the right spirit for kids and students to be thoughtful about how they approach their own academics, but also how to approach what skills they build for the future as well. On that note, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Brave. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. We would also appreciate you leaving a rating or review. Head over to www.bravesea.com for member content, resources, and community. Stay well and stay brave.